Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining us for today's PropMoto webinar. This one I think will be interesting and exciting. It's a topic that we have not covered before, a topic that I think goes a little under the radar, maybe unfairly so, and that's parking. I think it's something that a lot of people take for granted. Although, if you live in Southern California like myself, it can certainly be the difference between a good experience and a bad experience, or even wanting to leave the house or not wanting to leave the house. To be honest with you, having good parking or hassle-free parking, maybe I should say, is I think key to producing a good experience for any building in any asset class. But I think that there's also a lot of revenue opportunities that we will talk about in this webinar. There has been some changes to parking as much as parking hasn't changed much. I think the electric vehicles, possibly autonomous vehicles, right? There are actually some technologies that are coming through that are really changing fundamentally the way we think about parking in every asset type. So excited to talk about all of these things. As always, this is a live performance. Anything can happen. Babies can cry. I see we're joined now by a little one. Also, we would love to hear from all of you. I know that a lot of you have a ton of experience. We don't save time at the end for questions. We will just be taking them as they go, as long as they're pertinent to the conversation. So please feel free right here in the chat, or throw a question out, and we'll have all of our experts here answer it in kind. We're really happy to have all of you here and happy to get going. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce the speakers. First, we have Evan Golden. He's Chief Executive Officer at Parkade. It's a multifamily parking technology company. Hi, Evan.
Hey, good morning.
Thanks for joining. Next, we have Matthew Gray. He is Director of Client Services at a small multifamily portfolio called Graystar. You guys might have heard of.
There you go.
Hi, Matthew.
Small firm. Thank you, Franco. Pleasure to be here. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I think we just talked about this on intro. I think they are the largest multifamily owner in the country by a long shot at this point. So yeah, I know you guys have a wealth of information. Thanks again. Last but not least, we have Samuel Bordenov joining us from beautiful France. He's Chief Commercial Officer at Switch, and they're an EV charging company. Hi, Samuel.
Hello, everyone. Apologies. The pleasure of remote work is that I get to spend a lot of time with my daughter. She should be off camera in a little bit, but great to be with you all.
Well, happy to have both of you, and she is so mellow that yeah, we wouldn't even know she was here. So although I might have jinxed it by saying that. Well, great. I love to start these out just kind of talking a little bit about some of the big trends that are happening. I think, as we go along, we can kind of get into them a little deeper. But I just want to kind of, outline some of the trends that are really affecting parking in all asset classes, particularly, I think, multifamily, but certainly the other ones as well. I think, a big one that comes to mind is supply versus demand. And I think this has changed a lot in the last, I don't know, maybe 10 years, depending on where you are. A lot of cities are doing away with parking requirements, changing parking on the streets. I know a lot of multifamily now doesn't need to have parking, or actually will have parking kind of uncoupled, where you can buy that as a separate amenity. So just kind of want to hear from all of you, just kind of your thoughts about the direction of parking, right? Are we going to see this as a more precious resource as we go forward? And if so, what can we maybe do to get the most out of it? Evan, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I mean, the number one thing we've seen, and certainly Matt at Graystar and other developers are seeing, are parking ratios are falling, right? They peaked in 1998 around 1.7 spots per unit. The 2022 most recent data we have, they were around 1.1 spots per unit. So we're building less parking. And we're, going from a world where parking was not really a precious resource, and it's very much becoming a precious resource. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing for cities. cities. It's a good thing for the housing we build because we can spend a lot less money on the parking and spend more on the podcasting studios and other things. But it does mean that, people need to take a more proactive approach to managing parking. So this kind of dovetails into the other big trend that's changing pretty quickly in multifamily, which is we're seeing a lot of people starting to charge for parking that didn't used to. That was a pretty rare thing to do 20 years ago. These days, pretty much every new development we talk to is charging for parking, and most of the existing developments we talk to are also considering. So that's been a big change in the landscape over the last few decades.
And that's not only the private sector. I mean, I know a lot of cities now are expanding charging for parking too. It just kind of seems to be overall, which, I think people are more used to it now. Like when you go
Yeah,
out to a downtown area, you realize that like there's going to be a small or maybe not so nominal fee for parking your vehicle. So it's kind of a bit of a cultural change too.
exactly. And it's gotten easier too, right? 20 years ago, I remember carrying, nickels
Yeah.
and dimes and quarters around in my car. And now you just take out your smartphone. Services like Parkade have made that easy, but it's become easy, whether it's a developer looking to charge for parking or the city looking to charge for street parking. It's become a lot more easy to do that and to better manage the parking we have as well.
Yeah. And yeah, as a user too, right? You're not running back to your car.
Exactly.
You're not, worried about getting change and stuff. It really has become a lot more seamless in that respect.
Yeah.
Matthew, interested to hear from you about how you guys are thinking about kind of the changes. And I know you have talked you're in Southern California, a little bit about the kind of decoupling of multifamily and parking.
Well, there's always existed this era of how can we reduce costs? How can we increase other income opportunities? We have not only at a city level, it's now moved to a county level, this unbundling of parking, at least in our neck of the woods, AB 1317. That's in LA County, Riverside County, Santa Barbara County. You need to unbundle parking. That can no longer be included within rent. And I equate that to us moving along in life in this fee transparency era, and then really being conscious of how much is being bundled within chunk rents themselves. And so what was at least in SoCal, my urban core markets like downtown LA, Hollywood, downtown San Diego, Santa Monica as well, where you would unbundle parking, now we're seeing that on a more globular scale. And so we need to be cognizant of that. We need to lead from the front with trends. For better or for worse, California has largely led this tone or this movement across the nation, right? And so what could be just a microcosm in SoCal, I don't suspect to be the case, and this, may move and has already moved coast to coast.
I'm interested to hear from you, Matthew, too. What you kind of think about the demand, right? I'm always struck by, my friends, kids 16, 17, 18. So many of them don't have licenses anymore. I think is kind of a growing generation of people that are okay with, ride shares and don't have cars. Have you seen that in your communities?
Here's the path that we've gone. We went from in California giving me as much parking as we could. Give me as much as you can. Everybody's got a vehicle. You're driving everywhere. Maybe you're getting familiar with public transportation, but it's largely unknown and maybe there's some stigmas there. And now with opportunity zones and companies like Parkade, we're starting to get more comfortable with a reduced parking ratio. That's enormous for us, just given the costs of developing and, heaven forbid you're coring into the earth for sub-T parking. Those all relate to costs, right? And so with reduced parking ratios, there's more comfortability with tenants that, maybe I don't need a vehicle. Maybe there's walkability here. Maybe I can do car shares. Maybe I can lean on the expo lines that are in Los Angeles. That's opening up a new door in a hallway where previously we were really nervous about.
Samuel, I want to hear from you. I'm going to fold into this the growth of EVs, right? This is obviously something that is core to what you guys do. But what do you think about the kind of growing need for, or maybe shrinking need for parking, and how does that kind of play with the growing need for EV parking? I know that I don't think anybody thought EVs would grow as quickly as they have. Like it has become a substantial, at least here in Southern California. There's lots and lots of Teslas driving everywhere.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think from our perspective, we're not really, it's not whether the parking is getting reduced or increased. It's really what's being parked that's changing, right? And I think, there's various estimates out there, but by 2030, a really substantial amount of new car sales will be EVs, somewhere between maybe 20% of low end and 50% of the high end. But you're going to have kind of this shift and this cycling of the inventory of vehicles that are, used to be only ICE vehicles or internal combustion engines, and now increasingly are going to be electric vehicles that um, you know, have needs of their own and challenges of their own, but also opportunities. And I think for parking operators or people that have an interest in parking, it's both a headache to figure out how you're going to be um, setting up your parking to help those customers that have these new types of vehicles, but it also represents an opportunity because with this comes the opportunity to maybe charge for the electricity that those vehicles are going to be using, or design new opportunities around new types of customers coming to visit your building. So it's an exciting time, but it can be quite confusing and complex for people.
Hey Franco, if I may, just on that note, like at least for Greystar and with us in SoCal on the pre-development front, we spend a tremendous amount of time talking through parking ratios, EV demand, how much we see it being used, who should we utilize. It's for owners and clients, it's complicated, and they largely need their hand held on a lot of these items, and so being able to lean on the Samuels of the world that know what the heck they're talking about with structure and backbones and implementation has been enormous for us.
Especially with the older buildings, right? Because I know, I don't think anybody assumed that we would need this much power, coming to a parking lot for a building, right? Unless it was built, I'd say, in the last 5 years.
Sure. Very fair.
Evan, you're on mute there.
I just want to add, we've talked a lot about California and some of the changes here, but one of the things, that often surprises people is the trends we're talking about are not something we're just seeing on the coasts. I mean, we have customers in Dayton, Ohio, charging $150 a month for parking. We have customers in Arkansas charging $130 a month, and electrification is also growing really quickly in those places. Parking ratios are falling really fast in those places as well. So definitely a lot of action and change on the coast, but something we like to highlight that often surprises people, or even the price of parking, far, far from, our largest cities. It can be quite high, representing a really big revenue opportunity, also giving people just a really great tool in their belt to constrain demand.
Mm-hmm. And what do you guys think about the opportunity, that is presented itself for EVs? I know in the Inflation Reduction Act, there was a big, a lot of money earmarked to put kind of like a, countrywide electric vehicle charging network. I'm pretty sure that, is either scrapped or is on its way to being erased by the Trump administration. Do you think that provides even more opportunity because now you have so many less places to charge, and that now you have if you have an empty charger, you might be able to kind of bring people in from the outside? Samuel, I'll go with you on this one because I know I thought about this a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think just to take a step back, it's good to think about how the way that you're fueling your vehicle is going to change with an electric car compared to a regular like internal combustion engine. People tend to maybe assume that like, okay, with an EV, you're going to go to a gas station the same way that you've, gone to a gas station for your car. But we actually think, and studies have shown that it's much better to charge your car where the car is already parked, right? It's just a
Mhm.
much better experience when you come back home, you plug your car, and then it's full the next morning, or you drive to work, and you plug your car. And so instead of the gas station model, we like to talk about the cell phone model, right? You're never going anywhere to just charge your cell phone. Typically, you charge it in the evening, and then it's full the next morning. And so there's really a shift in the way that people are going to seek these charging amenities, which in turns is an opportunity for people who have parking garages. Either, if you have a parking garage because you own a multifamily building or office building, that you can kind of become this point where drivers are going to be charging your car. And that might bring, if you're in a multifamily situation, that you are able to attract these tenants that are seeking a place to charge their car, with maybe a new place that they're renting. In an office or retail situation, that might mean the difference between having these people come and go to the shops that you have and the offices that you have, or choosing a different location. So with EV charging comes this opportunity of actually getting new people, which oftentimes you think about, I'm going to be able to charge electricity, but you don't actually think about this, the changes in patterns of where people are driving.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk a little bit about some of the problems that people have with parking. I think, often parking is kind of seen as a bit of a burden, right? Again, it's not, by the real estate industry, it's maybe, a necessary piece of any portfolio, but I don't know if it's always looked at as, oh, this is this great opportunity we have, right? We're going to have all these parking spaces. So, I mean, one of the problems I think is maybe just the size. And Matthew, you talked about this earlier. I'd love for you to maybe elaborate on it a little bit. Like, what are the right ratios? And these are buildings that could be there for 20, 100 years, right? So it's like, how do you plan now when it comes to parking for a moving target of how people are interacting with automobiles and how transportation is taking place?
Yeah, you have to future-proof yourself in a sense here. Heaven forbid you just truly don't have enough and it's bottom of the barrel and you're planning on outside creative parking solutions that may be neighboring lots. Heaven forbid those get developed and then your business plan was contingent upon that. I have a wonderful case study for us, and coincidentally, I had lived at this asset. It was prime time Santa Monica, institutional client of ours. It's a collection of 15 assets, maybe over 1,500 parking stalls, just a lot. And our teams are excellent at what they do in property management, but it sure is nice to lean on the outside services like Parkade to alleviate woes related to parking. Kind of a similar thing with package management, right? We're great at leasing, but gosh, if we could hire in or bring in the big guns to help us with parking and help solve this cobweb, we'd love that. To my earlier note on pressures on reducing expenses and increasing other income opportunities, this is right down this institutional client's highway, right? And so what we did is we brought in Parkade and they unwrapped the web that was 1,500 parking stalls that were bundled with relatively low guest parking, which was an irritant of mine when I was living there, right? I had to have friends and family park on the street. And you bring in a Parkade and it's kind of threefold here. Residents are happy, communication is better, they understand the fluidity of parking, which Evan will probably chat about. Communication, reputation is just great. Ownership is happy because we're driving other income, for gosh sakes, right? And so that's a win-win. And then my staff, it's less abrasive with residents, should we have to tow or if there's messaging or, us living in harmony. That cools that. And so it's really a one, two, three for us on a otherwise other income opportunity that this institutional client hadn't considered for a decade plus.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that customer, just to chime in, I mean, they'll be making once Parkade is fully rolled out and once they've fully unbundled parking because they're giving existing residents some time to adjust to parking fees. They'll probably be making about $2 million a year in ancillary revenue from a single, I don't want to say a single building, but a single complex. So, we're talking about a pretty substantial amount of money that's, going to contribute a lot in terms of increased asset value once things are said and done. But taking a step back on that, parking is a loss leader, right? For multifamily, multifamily is not building parking generally for the express purpose of making money on the parking. They're building parking. We are building parking so that the units can get rented. And that then, so it's very much a necessary evil for, Matt's team, for, folks that are tasked with leasing and managing these properties. It's not something they want to spend time on. It's something they kind of have to spend time on. And so, because it's not their, the number one thing on their list, it's not doing a tour, it's not getting a lease signed, it's not retaining a tenant. It's tough to manage. And, until very recently, until, we came about, there's never been a tool expressly for managing multifamily parking. So the biggest headaches were, I've got, a million things on my list. I'm a property manager and I've got a parking spreadsheet that I've got to keep up to date because Yardi just doesn't really work for me. And, it's not a great way to actually track and enforce parking or run parking charges. So they've got, a parking spreadsheet in one place. They've got, their rentable items in Yardi that they're trying to keep track of, but they, Franco just moved in and they were really busy and they forgot to add that rentable item after that conversation where you picked your parking spot. And they're just spending a lot of time dealing with something that is just not a great use of time in the property management space. So that's the biggest concerns we've seen from kind of the staff perspective. There's also, we've talked about parking ratios, but making sure they are getting enough out of their parking is really important. Our first Greystar asset actually was a property where they were telling tours that there was a 1 to 2 month wait for a parking spot after move-in. And this was in Koreatown in California, really parking impacted area. And they were losing, potential customer after potential customer from this. And, we came in, we launched, they went from a shortfall of 18 spots to a surplus of 8 long-term monthly parking spots. And where did all these spots come from? They came from, unfortunately bad records because there'd been a lot of management. The old manager had left and that kind of took the parking spreadsheet with them. There were people that were supposed to be charged for parking and weren't being charged. And once they got charged, they decided to sell their car or park somewhere else. There were people that didn't need a full-time spot, but were getting a spot just, as Matt described, for guests. So that we can essentially find a lot of inventory just by making better use of the parking that we have. So that's been a major issue as well.
Going back to the EV piece here, Samuel, I'm interested to hear from you about, some of the problems people have with EVs. I've done some interviews and was shocked to hear that, leasing bit is actually a bit of a problem and something that no manager, I think, wants to do. How do you maybe navigate that? And, is there like a third party option? Like what are some of the best practices for making sure that EVs are actually being used for EV parking spots are actually being used for EVs?
Yeah, great point. And I think I'll echo a little bit what Evan said in that uh basically the advent of EVs in parking lots has like created kind of a lot of headaches for parking managers, and sometimes they're a little bit it's just like one more thing that I have to deal with. But fortunately, there is some technology out there that's helping them. I mean, I think one of the common issues that we hear from folks is, in a lot of places when if you have valet parking, or if you have folks in the parking garage or helping kind of manage and move cars around, then EV charging is like another hassle because they might have to like charge the car and then move the car somewhere else because there's only a few chargers available. That's a common headache. And kind of related to that, if there is a shared parking space with EV charging and no one to move the car around, then you might end up with some tenants that just park their car there and leave it there overnight and never kind of move somewhere else. And then this like supposedly shared amenity actually is only being used by one person. You need to have tools that can tell you, kind of act either as a scheduling so that each tenant can kind of pick the time that they can use the shared amenity, or can kind of provide means of enforcement. So like if somebody's parked there and they're not charging, then you might actually start paying, giving them a loitering fee. And then better than sharing a few chargers is figuring out ways that you can actually provide chargers for each parking spot where there is an EV, which might require you to think about the electrical infrastructure that you have and how you can share that electrical infrastructure to multiple different chargers. And then again, there you might need a software solution for that. So it's created, headaches, but nothing that's not solvable by technology, fortunately. And that's what's us and other companies are providing.
Yeah, I've been surprised to hear, talking with you, that, it's actually doable to have a lot more, I think, EV spots than people assume that they can have, right? Based on their electrical infrastructure. I think if you do it right, you can kind of, move the load around to where it needs to go in a way that I think unlocks a lot more spaces and probably a lot more dedicated spaces, like you said, which is a way better arrangement for most people, right? You want to know that you're going to plug in when you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. In a lot of existing buildings, the like when our teams get in and to do an assessment of a building, oftentimes we'll go into like the control, the electrical room of the building, and it's this old room that's full of cobwebs, and maybe it looks like all the panels are maxed out. But if you actually do the analysis, which we can do, you'll find out that there's a lot of available capacity, and it just needs to be managed so that if they're, at the end of the day at 7 p.m., if everyone's using the electricity, then maybe you have less power available. But in the middle of the night, you might have a lot more power available because all the lights are off. And just having a way to manage intelligently the load of your chargers can enable you to charge a lot of cars, sometimes 10, if even 15 more than what you would, what you've been able to deploy, and have that load be more during the night, and in the morning you'll have full full batteries, which is what you're looking for. So it's always, when thinking about EV charging, as a building owner, my advice is to really think about not just the physical, chargers that you need to install, but also the intelligent piece, the software behind it that is going to manage those chargers, because you can get a lot more, bang for your bucks if you're thinking through that lens as well.
Yeah, maybe I can chime in on just to echo Samuel. I think uh, you very much need to prepare for this EV transition. I've been driving an EV for 4 years now and do not miss going to the gas station. But I think the worst thing that owners and operators can do is spend the money on a great solution like Samuel's and then forget about managing the parking. Right. I see this time and time again where, and Samuel probably has as well. So, an owner will install a dozen EV chargers and then just leave it at that. Right. First come, first serve, have fun tenants, right. We'll recoup our costs, of course, from just charging for electricity. 3 months later, they walk by for a site visit and they see, two F-150s and a, 1998 Corolla sitting there. And they're wondering why they're not making their money back on EV charging. So it's really important that as we transition to EVs, folks don't repeat the same mistakes we're making with parking overall. You can't just kind of build this stuff and hope for the best. You need to properly manage it and properly price it and properly enforce it as well.
You have all this money that you dumped into EV infrastructure, and then the system's broken thereafter, right? With either policies or overarching management. That's a real bummer. and hurts us reputationally, and maybe was a reason you moved into the building, for gosh sakes, right? And then there's this feeling here where there was items promised and now you're not delivering. So this is all full scale, exactly what we're seeking in a parking manager slash EV charging provider.
I was going to ask you, Matthew. I mean, do you have a sense for how useful EVs are as a leasing tool?
Huge. The word has been said now a few times. That's an amenity that we boast of. We need
Mhm.
arrows in our quiver that are differentiators. And now with the EV rollout, we're seeing that in many buildings given code minimums, but we have to have it. So now you start talking about speeds, and I know Samuel was just chatting about, when you're charging, and we'll unpack with Evan and Parkade, what are our rates monthly, right? How competitive is that within the market? Where the parking space is located within the parking garage themselves. This is all important. It is an intelligent renter in our neck of the woods, and I'm sure nationwide here, but they do their due diligence, right? They know that there are other assets that are competing for their tenancy as well. So what are we offering? Do we have super speedy EV charging? Does the parking map make sense? Reputationally, have we been doing well? It's full fold right here, right?
Mhm.
This all makes up a happy renter and an outcome of a good reputation.
Yeah, and I would posit that it's almost more than an amenity because
Mm.
people can do without amenities. Okay, I'll get a gym membership if there's not a gym. You can't really do without it. If I'm not going to go sell my car to live in this complex. I'm just going to live somewhere else. I'm not going to park, 3 blocks down and walk every day, or wake up and not have enough charge in my car to go do what I want. So I think for a small amount of people growing, it's certainly, like, I think, a deal breaker. So that's something to think
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
We've talked about a lot of different technologies. All obviously these technologies have to come together. We talked about Yardi maybe kind of being a little clunky when it comes to parking systems. You have BMSs obviously now that load management is a huge piece of this. I'm interested to hear from you guys. What are some of the ways that these can be integrated, right? I don't think everybody wants to have 1,000 different logins and have to train people on every new person on all of these things. Is there a way to do this where it does kind of come into one place to make it easier on the management team? Evan, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think the beauty of what we do is our product is integrated into your systems, and buildings are able to really step away from parking. So they're still in control, and that's the beauty of working with Parkade. If a building wants to run a parking special, or this particular resident really needs this particular spot, and we need to move people around. They're kind of always in charge. But the beauty of our platform is you roll it out, it's integrated. You can really stop thinking about parking as a management team and step away. The platform takes care of itself. Resident moves in, the whole life cycle is just self-serve and automated. Franco signs a lease, you get access to Parkade immediately. You can see your parking options yourself. You don't have to go to Matt's team and ask them to literally walk you around the parking garage, which is what we see happening before Parkade rolls out. Leasing agents are literally doing tours and touring the parking garage with people, and then cross-checking their parking spreadsheet on the go of trying to figure out which spots are available. So everything becomes self-serve. You don't need to, hand out fobs either. So another system that, can be automated. I remember sitting in, again, back to that first Greystar deployment in Koreatown, sitting at the front desk, and residents came by, multiple times just in the first day I was there, saying, "Hey, I lost my fob. Can I get a new one?" And, manager's got to drop what they're doing, has got to grab that fob, put it in their records, activate it, set it up, hand it over to the resident, maybe charge for it. All of these things just become, instant, automated, really self-serve for the resident. And it becomes this kind of beautiful integrated piece of technology that allows the team to stop thinking about things, while the asset, the parking, your parking spaces are just much better utilized and monetized than they would be if your staff were doing it themselves. So the integrated nature of what we do has been a really compelling part of the package for sure.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure the management teams don't love, and the leasing teams don't love walking around,
No.
showing people parking spots either. Samuel, I'm interested to hear from you. I know that you guys actually do quite a bit of integration, particularly when it comes to loads, right? You're actually looking at the loads of not just a parking lot, right? The entire property.
Yeah, yeah, especially I'd say since we're often the latest technology that comes into a building, and so building owners are already dealing with an existing technology stack, and they don't want to have the headache of having to deal with an additional one. Um, so yeah, I think on our we want to be integrated with the technology that our customers, real estate companies and building owners use, and we do that with like two kind of guiding principles in mind. The first is really to improve the user experience, both from what Evan talked about, like not having 50 different platforms on the management side, but also on the user side, not having to deal with 50 different apps. So we integrate with tenant apps, so that people that are already using an app to use the other amenities of the building can use that for charging. But also, we integrate increasingly with parking technology companies so that you can, in a public setting, you can pay for parking and charging at the same time. And then the second kind of guiding principle is to add value for the building. With the advent of EV charging is eventually going to represent somewhere between a third and half of the building's demand for electricity. So a huge increase in demand for electricity, which has a pretty big impact on the electricity bills. And so if you're not really thinking about this, you can end up with really big spikes in demand, spike in your demand charges, which is kind of like that fixed cost that you need to pay based on the highest demand for electricity throughout the month. But if so we've been thinking a lot about this, and on the one hand, integrating with BMSs and other kind of big electricity demand in the building, like HVAC systems, is a way to optimize this overall demand of the building and
Mhm.
reduce the electricity bill. And on the other end, you can also integrate with utilities and actually get paid to dispatch your power, or not charge a certain hours that might be like the most expensive. So we're participating in utility programs where we are actually or I should say, our building owners or customers are being rewarded from being connected to the utility, and so that's bringing additional revenue for them, and lowers the total cost of installing those chargers.
Matthew, do you have anything to add here just about, I know that you guys have a lot of buildings. Probably some of them don't all have identical tech stacks, right? And, depending on the owners and the operation, how do you guys think about integrating things in order to make it maybe less of a pull on your staff?
You betcha. 400 assets between Central California and Chula Vista. We're enormous, over 100,000 units, a lot of clients with differing needs. There are a couple words that have been said: automation, integration, ease of use is paramount for us. If we can do this sidewalk to sofa vibe with residents that are moving in, or even existing residents where it feels seamless, that is enormous for us. Here's a quick analogy. We had a world where we purchased a cable account or purchased a cable subscription, you had all the channels. And now we've gone this app-based program, right? My wife and I have a subscription to now 9 different apps, and it ends up in totality equating to more than what our cable package was. If I can just have this efficient building system that is EV charging, make maintenance requests, log on to the Parkade app, that's hugely important for us and ultimately results in a better resident programming, resident use. So we welcome that. I think as we continue to move forward here, automation wise, leaning on the big dogs that are Evan and Samuel will be paramount for us in the property management world.
Got a great question here. I'd love to throw out to all of you. Are there any do's and don'ts or lessons learned that you guys can share around introducing paid parking into parking areas that were previously free? Obviously, some people might get a little salty about this. What are some of the ways to do this to kind of reduce the friction or the blowback?
Yeah.
We'll stick with
Oh, yeah.
you on this
Go
one.
for it.
Maybe you have some. You guys have probably done this, and then
Yeah, we've done it, and this should be a tag team between Evan and I because his team is masterful. It is, of course, communication up front, being crystal clear and managing expectations. That's enormous for us. Getting in front of this best we can. Inevitably, there will be some friction, right? It's a numbers game as well, but I think as best we can be polished, confident in the offering, confident in the amenity that we're bringing to our residents and speaking in a clear and concise fashion is huge for us. Ultimately, this is something that they'll be able to boast about and ease I mentioned it before, just the staff to resident harmony.
Evan, interested to hear from you on this too.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we do day in and day out, right? We're helping people monetize their parking, and in many communities, monetize it for the first time. So learned a lot of lessons here. I think, Matt alluded to managing expectations properly. That's definitely really important. We've seen communities roll out paid parking in kind of two or three different ways. One of those ways is we've seen communities where, they went from parking being free to, hey, parking is $50, $75 a month, for everyone effective in 60 days. To do that, maybe it's obvious. In some cases, we've seen it wasn't. You need to review your lease language, right? What lease language did you have? And, is that change going to be supported by your lease language? Some leases, people are forecasting this kind of change and allow them to, impose changes on parking mid lease for folks. But you also need to manage expectations. To Matt's point, we had a community in Ohio where the lease language supported charging for parking, but it turned out that they didn't realize that their leasing agents had actually been telling people that parking was going to remain free for the lease term. So we rolled out, we together rolled out paid parking and got a lot of blowback from residents who felt kind of deceived on that front, and they had to walk it back and say, okay, we're going to do this slowly. And so that goes into kind of the next way you can do this, where we've seen a lot of communities roll out paid parking as leases turn over. So everybody, no problem. You're gonna, Matt's been, he has his free parking spot. He loves his free parking spot. He's going to keep his free parking spot until renewal. And that's been pretty attractive for people because, rent growth has been slowing, but this allows for a change that people don't necessarily feel quite as hard as the rent growing because it's an optional fee, right? You may get rid of your car, you may travel, you may park it at work for a while. This is an avoidable fee if you have options. So we've seen a lot of communities where they wait to transition people, until leases actually renew. And of course, all throughout, new folks are moving in as well. So new folks are getting the new price. Existing folks are going to pay the new price on turnover. And then the other way to do things, and this is the case in the asset that Matt used to live in, is that they're actually letting existing residents keep their existing pricing as long as they live there. And while that obviously will hurt your ancillary revenue growth, that's a great retention tactic to say, hey, existing resident, if you move out of here, you're going to lose your free parking. And look at all these new residents that are moving in and are paying $150 for parking, and you're not. It definitely helps them feel like they're getting a great deal. So those are some of the strategies we've seen. I'd say in general, we really strongly recommend less specificity in your leases as you write them. We see a lot of communities where literally the parking spot and the price are written into the lease. And that's problematic because if that person moves in and they change spots on day two, are you remembering to go back and actually change that lease? So we recommend kind of more generic language in parking leases because we've seen a lot of problems come up there. Additionally, make sure that a problem we see frequently is we see people not actually put zero or not even put a price in the parking addendum of their leases. And that can cause some tricky situations, right? If the price simply is not defined, you may have a lot of tenant pushback when you seek to actually charge for that spot. So make sure you're filling out your leases as well. Those are some of the strategies. But at the end of the day, it's really all about expectations and communication.
Sure. Yeah, that's super, super interesting. And I can see that being a powerful retention tool, right? Everybody likes to have that kind of grandfathered thing. You want to give it up. So I can see that
Exactly.
helping keep people there, which is paramount right now, right? I think retention is on the top of a lot of owners' minds. But Samuel, I want to put this question to you, but I'll kind of tweak it a little bit. Obviously, whenever you are doing changes with EV spots, the number of EVs, whether it's dedicated or not, there's some blowback as well, right? So how do you guys kind of communicate with residents to make sure they understand exactly what they're getting and why?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a tailored approach because it really depends on the building and the use. But in general, actually, the demand for EV charging oftentimes comes from the residents. But one thing that is super important is to communicate with everyone to say like, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're deploying EV charging. By the way, you please raise your hand if you're interested in charging. So we've actually seen in condo buildings, folks, decide that they want to get a charger in their parking spot, even if they don't have an EV yet, but they're like, hey, my next car is going to be an EV. I
Mhm.
want to have that for my spot, and so they're willing to come in and pay for their share of the cost. So communication upfront is important also to set the expectation that like, hey, this is depending on what you're doing, but oftentimes this is going to have a cost. Like you're not going to be charging for free, and you're not going to be using the outlets that are in the parking garage, because obviously if that's kind of defeating the purpose of deploying charging if people can just plug their car with the outlet and just get free electricity from that. But then beyond that, I think it's really a great way to, actually get additional revenues and increase your NOI. We have a lot of customers that are charging more for a parking spot that has enabled EV charging than they are for a parking spot that doesn't have EV charging. We've had customers that own a public commercial garage that are again like charging more for those EV spots, including for their monthly users. So folks that come every month have a dedicated parking spot. They can upsell them to like a premium tier so that their monthly usage is going to include having access to EV charging. So it's really an opportunity to rethink how you're going to be making money from charging, but also from sort of upselling your customers and giving them access at a higher cost to this new form of technology. Yeah. Evan, I saw you nodded right
Yeah,
there as
I would just I was just gonna jump on the back of that comment and say, this reminds me of a key thing I probably missed in mentioning, best practice for rolling out paid parking is think through what amenities you can actually add when you roll out paid parking. So can you introduce EV charging at the same time? Right? That gives residents a big win that you can point to and say, hey, yes, we're charging $50 a month for this thing that used to be free, but now we have 20 switch EV chargers. Another great kind of arrow in the quiver is can you move to reserve parking? We see that a lot as well, where we've seen communities move from there's a big trend in multifamily moving from these unassigned free parking zones that are overrun generally with illegally parked cars. We have lots of stories of finding dozens of illegally parked cars when buildings move from unassigned parking to assigned because unassigned parking is really hard to enforce, and then offer residents assigned or reserved parking instead of that. And that's a huge amenity for people. We've found communities where they were doing a hybrid approach and offering some reserve parking, or you could do the free unassigned, and you'd be shocked, at the percentage of residents that actually prefer to pay for the reserve parking spot versus park in the free area because they know exactly where they're going to park every
Mhm.
day, or perhaps they have an EV charger in that spot, in which case they're even happy to pay significantly more. So that's another big tactic I'd recommend folks think about is, how can you actually make your parking better if you're going to start charging for it? And that's something we're really good at helping folks with as well.
Yeah, it goes back to the change management, right? I think people are willing to pay.
Yeah,
If you're just like, hey, you're getting the exact same thing, but now you got to pay for it. Nobody loves that, but saying, okay, you're paying, but look, this is going to be a better experience. You probably don't love this arrangement. So I could certainly see that helping smooth the transition.
exactly.
Got another question here I want to field, particularly it's for you, Samuel, which is, how do you manage shared EV spots so that once a car is charged, they're quick to move, right? I think this happens a lot. You charge for 3 hours, but your car is there for 36 or something. How do you do that? How does that communication work?
Yeah. So we have in our platform the ability to detect when a car is plugged but not charging. And so what we do is typically we give the building owners or the managers the ability to decide what happens when a car is fully charged. And typically what we do is after a grace period, the car will start being charged for loitering, for just sitting there and not charging. And it's all run through our app and our payment system, so it's automated. So usually after being kind of caught and having to pay, 20 additional bucks for loitering there for another hour, people are pretty quick to then move their car. And you also have, we can also integrate with things like license plate recognition and other types of video technology, so that if a car is parked there but it's actually not plugged, it's not it's not even an electric vehicle, then you can detect that and then you can alert the parking manager that, like, hey, this car is not supposed to be
Mhm.
put there.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would.
It's a means of contention, right? And so we try to be soft-handed with this. You don't
Sure.
want to you don't want to tow vehicles,
Yeah.
and it just causes abrasion with the residents, right? So to Evan's earlier point, lease agreements, policies and procedures, super important to have all that in writing. And then just the necessary management 101 on the back end, right? Communication, hey, this happened once, please don't let it happen again.
Sure.
Warnings, you hate to go monetary, but maybe you do. And then worst case, we're talking about removing vehicles.
Yeah. Well, and again, I would just add another shout out for, you can't leave these parking spots unmanaged and expect good behavior,
Mhm.
right? If you leave these parking spots unmanaged, you're going to see that kind of behavior. And, the EV companies will know if it's still plugged in and charging. If I go downstairs and I just unplug my vehicle and walk away, you're not going to get those alerts. So you really need to proactively manage these parking spots, set time limits, make people actually book them, and then you can actually easily enforce rules. And if you're using if you're using Parkade to give us a plug, you don't have to deal with these enforcement issues, right? If we find out that someone's parked there and they've stayed more than 6 hours and they're not supposed to, we deal with it rather than the management team having to, drop what they're doing. They're, trying to book a tour and, go run and chase down this Tesla owner that's been parked there for 7 hours. So,
Yeah.
not if you kind of set things up for failure, you're going to get failure. So you just really need to reiterate, make sure you're managing these spots properly.
Got another question. It's for Matthew, but I'm going to push it to all of you as our last one here because I think this is always kind of what I like to do, a bit of a prediction. Can you talk more about the commercialization models, how the commercialization models are changing and monetizing for owners? Where do you see the market and your parking strategy in 5 years from now? Matthew, I'll start with you on this one since it was directed at you.
But we've entered this era of fee transparency, right? We're carving out all of these fees, and that's not going to go anywhere. So I see and we started the call with this, what were those unbundled markets and cities broadening to counties and state level and what have you? I don't see that trend changing. What I will say is, monetarily speaking, I'm starting to see my secondary and tertiary markets that are, maybe suburbs or rural start to introduce this unbundled parking, and maybe it's $10, maybe it's 15, maybe it's $25. I see that all increasing here as we become more and more fee transparent. On the other side, if you asked me this 3 years ago, I'd say, give me as much parking as you can. We'll get you as much income as humanly possible. Give me just as many parking spots as you can. And now I've come around to reduced parking spaces. We can make just as much, if not more, income with smart parking solutions. Maybe that trend continues. I have a tough time believing in people selling their vehicles in non-walkable areas or not near, major metros. So we'll see. It's going to be a mixed bag, as is SoCal, but I see this monetization and more efficient parking ratio trend continuing.
Evan, interested to hear your opinion on this one. What do you
Yeah, I mean, I would
think of?
echo everything Matt said, and my earlier comment of just we're seeing this trend bear out across the U.S. We have customers bang down our door in, again, Rogers, Arkansas, and Lansing, Michigan, and places you wouldn't expect to want to take charging for parking seriously, managing parking seriously. And that's very quickly changing. So I think the ancillary revenue excitement has been real for a lot of folks, and they're really seeing the potential of that. We skipped an important reason that you charge for parking, that Matt and his team and others charge for parking, that you can actually advertise lower rents, right? If you used to charge $2,000 a month for a two-bedroom, and now it's, $1,600 a month and it's 400 for two parking spots. Well, you can go on Zillow and advertise that unit for $1,600 a month. That's going to get you a lot more tours. We've seen communities where they saw 30-40% increases in tours after unbundling their parking because they were able to market these much lower rents, base rents. So, the fee transparency world can actually be quite helpful for business if done correctly. So I think all of these trends that we've been seeing the last few years are going to continue, but I do think we're going to see, a lot more folks in multifamily realize that, their time is not best spent managing their own parking. Their time is best spent, getting more tours booked, high priority maintenance items, all that kind of stuff. So I think we're excited to see the next few years.
Great. Samuel, take us home with the time we got. What do you think in the next 5 years? What are we going to see?
Yeah, I mean, certainly more EVs parked in those parking garages. And so definitely more demand from tenants to have access to EV charging, and um, increasing awareness of that as being a key part of looking for a place to live. So I think it's going to continue to be an increasingly deciding factor in finding finding your home. I would say, yeah, definitely keep that in mind. I'd also add something, because I recently talked to the parking manager at UC San Diego in California, where it's kind of a dispatch from the future, because they do have a ton of EVs, like almost a majority of the cars that they have parked. And so they're running into, really real issues around how do you manage your electric load, what we were discussing around how you make sure that the chargers are available for everyone. And so um, how do you enforce loitering and things like that? And they're turning to their EV charging provider for these. Hopefully in 5 years and 10 years from now, we'll have technology to help us kind of deploy these chargers in a way that's sustainable and a good opportunity for building owners.
Great. Well, this has been awesome. I know we could keep going, but we have to leave it there. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I will say, if anyone wants to be connected with any of the panelists here, please reach out to me. I'm happy to do so. My email is franco@propmoto.com, FRANCO @propmoto.com. just send something out and I can connect you with all of these great panelists. I'm sure they have more insights for you. Just wanted to say thanks everyone for joining. Please join the next one. You see, these are hopefully worth your time. I know all of you are busy, important people. So Evan, Samuel, Matthew, thank you all so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Franco.
everybody.